The world once ended in white. Not in oceans or storms, but in silence. A silence so deep it bent the edge of every map. For centuries, no one truly knew what waited there. Some said it was the mouth of the planet, swallowing ships whole. Others, a mirror world, untouched, unspoken, meant only for gods. When the first sailors came close enough to see its ghostly glow on the horizon, they felt the air change. It grew heavier, older, as if every breath was borrowed from another age. Icebergs drifted past like broken statues, and the sea hissed with cold. The sound of the earth exhaling secrets. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. But even that name was an illusion, because what they saw wasn't land at all, but time, frozen in motion. The explorers who reached its shores wrote of a stillness that frightened them, mountains that seemed carved rather than formed, shadows that stretched too far, and winds that carried a low hum, like voices beneath the snow. They said the silence wasn't empty. It listened. And maybe it did. Beneath that endless white lay a continent older than history. A place that once knew sunlight, forests and rivers that sang through green valleys. But those memories were buried, sealed under millions of years of ice. The earth had hidden its past here, tucking it beneath layers of frozen time, as if afraid of what it might reveal. In the cores drilled from its depths, scientists found stories written in ice, rings of warmth, spores of plants, whispers of rain. Antarctica, it seemed, had once been alive, but something had changed. A sudden coldness, a curtain drawn over memory. No one truly knows why. Some say it was nature's doing, the slow drift of continents, the shift of poles. Others believe it was something else, something buried deliberately. A vault made not of stone or steel, but silence. Even satellites pass above it, tracing the smooth expanse of white. The signals return imperfect, distorted, as if something below interferes. Sometimes, heat blooms appear where none should exist. Sometimes, straight lines cut across the landscape, too perfect to be chance, too deliberate to be nature. And yet, the world looks away. It always has. Because to face Antarctica is to face the unknown, not of the planet, but of ourselves. It is a mirror we're not ready to look into. At the bottom of every ancient map, cartographers once left a blank space, not out of ignorance, but reverence. They understood that some truths aren't meant to be charted. They're meant to be remembered in silence. And so, Antarctica waits. Cold, vast, listening. A continent that remembers the world before we did. A continent that holds the sorrow of everything the earth chose to forget. The ice keeps its promise, to bury, to protect, to preserve. But ice melts, and when it does, the world will no longer be allowed to dream in white. Because every blank space was left for a reason. The ice is not just frozen water. It is memory, pressed down by time, folded over itself until history became geology. Beneath miles of frozen silence lies a vault, sealed so perfectly that even light has forgotten how to enter. It does not age, it does not shift, it only waits. Scientists call it preservation, the miracle of cold. But the earth remembers differently. It remembers why it chose to bury its past so deep. Because beneath this frozen world lies everything it once wanted to forget, and everything it could not bear to lose. If you could walk there, beneath the white, you would find layers stacked like pages in a forgotten book. Each one tells a story, a summer that never ended, a storm that changed everything. The breath of forests that once stretched where now only wind survives. Within those thin lines of frost are trapped the sighs of extinct skies, the whispers of vanished rain, and the quiet pulse of creatures that no longer have names. The deeper you go, the stranger the silence becomes. Temperature falls, pressure rises, and then the instruments begin to lie. Machines falter, data bends. Heat signatures flicker where there should be none. Currents of warmth drift through ancient cold, like ghosts refusing to die. Something moves, but not with motion. Something exists beneath stillness itself. The vault does not merely preserve the past, it guards it. The deeper drills go, the more the ice feels deliberate, sculpted, almost architectural. Perfectly arranged, crystalline corridors locked in formation, each chamber colder, quieter, more defiant, as if the planet itself built walls around its secrets, protecting them from whatever the surface became. And sometimes, when the cores are pulled from the depths, they whisper. The sound is faint, a crack, a sigh, a shift. But within that sound there's an echo of something alive. Some scientists claim it's just the ice releasing pressure. Others say it's time, exhaling. There are fossils here that should not exist. Ferns from warmer worlds, pollen from unseen forests, and microscopic traces of creatures that defy the known family of life. Their DNA speaks a language older than biology, older than anything we understand. Every shard of ice is a relic, every layer a confession. The Earth, it seems, has been keeping secrets from itself. We look at the white expanse and see emptiness, but in truth it is the densest archive ever made, a record not written in ink, but in silence. For every empire that rose and fell, Antarctica was listening. For every extinction, it wept quietly into its own cold hands. And when humanity began its noise, its wars, its walls, its endless movement, the planet closed its diary and froze it shut. Now, as the ice begins to melt, the locks weaken. The vault groans with age. Hidden rivers awaken beneath the surface, carrying fragments of stories no one was meant to hear. The past stirs, stretching against its boundaries. We stand above it, pretending to study it. But maybe it is studying us. Maybe it wonders if we've learned enough to be trusted with what it holds. Because the White Vault is not just a record, it is a warning. And as the warmth of the modern world seeps deeper each year, the question becomes harder to ignore. What happens when the planet's memory finally remembers us? From a distance, Antarctica is perfection, an endless field of white stretching beyond imagination, smooth as glass and silent as sleep. But the closer you look, the less it behaves like nature. Beneath the purity of snow, patterns begin to emerge, lines too straight, angles too precise, shapes that defy the chaos of ice and wind. At first, satellites dismissed them as tricks of light, shadows playing across uneven terrain. But shadows do not form triangles that hold their symmetry for miles. They do not repeat or align with the cardinal points of a compass. Yet here they do. From orbit, the ridges appear as though carved with intention. Long corridors of raised ice, connecting geometric planes that seem to echo some ancient design. And when the low sun strikes the horizon, their edges glow in perfect harmony, as if revealing an outline drawn by invisible hands. Nature doesn't draw in straight lines, but something did. It began with a single image, a formation resembling a pyramid, half buried in snow. Scientists labeled it pareidolia, the mind's need to find meaning where none exists. But more images followed. A ridge shaped like a staircase, descending into shadow. A valley lined with repeating angles, too clean for coincidence. Soon, researchers whispered of a pattern across the continent, a hidden geometry sleeping beneath the ice. No one dared to claim discovery. Instead, they buried it in silence, labeling the anomalies as optical illusions or data artifacts. But some of those who studied the images long enough described a strange feeling, a quiet pull, like being watched by the land itself. The patterns seemed to follow an order, a rhythm, like an architecture made not for the human eye, but for something that saw differently. What could build such shapes in a world never meant for life? Perhaps they are remnants, ruins of a forgotten era when the Con Ponceau. Tynant was green when rivers ran through valleys now sealed under glacial glass. Maybe these geometric forms are the skeletons of cities long erased, their bones preserved by the same ice that entombed the forests. Or maybe they are something else entirely, blueprints not of stone, but of intention. If you stand upon one of those ridges, nothing feels man-made. And yet the ground vibrates with an order that's difficult to describe, like standing atop a cathedral whose song has been frozen mid-note. The silence becomes structured. The wind seems to move in rhythm. Every direction feels measured, deliberate. It's as though the earth, at some moment long ago, tried to build something, not with hands, but with force, not for beauty, but for remembrance. And maybe the ice simply followed that memory, tracing the lines of something that once existed before time chose to bury it. When the sun moves across the horizon, the shadows return. Dark corridors drawn in light, leading nowhere, or perhaps leading inward. Beneath them, radar images show voids, perfectly rectangular, perfectly aligned. Nature, once again, takes the blame for precision that no storm or freeze can explain. The continent hides many shapes, but this one feels different. It breathes, not in motion, but in presence, as if the geometry itself remembers what it was meant to be. Perhaps these are the echoes of a civilization erased not by time, but by mercy. Or perhaps the planet, in its grief, tried to keep their memory alive in the only way it knew, by freezing it into the fabric of itself. From orbit, it's just ice. But from closer, it's something else. A pattern, a message, a pulse beneath the frost. The earth speaks softly here, through angles and silence, through the geometry of the forgotten. And if you listen long enough, the white begins to whisper back. High above the white desert, the mountains of Antarctica rise like frozen waves, vast, jagged spires that pierce through the clouds and vanish into the cold blue silence. For ages, they were thought to be lifeless, untouched by anything but wind and snow. But when satellites began to map the continent in exquisite detail, strange shadows appeared along the mountain faces. They looked like steps, wide, deliberate, carved into stone, that no tool had touched in millions of years. At first, scientists dismissed them as illusions, the tricks of light over uneven terrain. But the lines repeated, layer upon layer, rhythm upon rhythm, as though the mountains themselves had been shaped by purpose. From above, the formations seemed to rise toward darkened hollows, entrances half buried in snow, the kind of symmetry that nature rarely invents, but memory never forgets. When explorers examined the images more closely, they saw something unsettling. The steps aligned perfectly with the compass. East to west, rise to fall, precision born not of chaos but of design. Yet no design should survive here, not in this place where wind scrapes everything clean. Some say they are remnants of an ancient civilization, a people who lived before the ice and carved their homes into the mountains to escape whatever came for them. Others say they are natural terraces, sculpted by glaciers and time. But even nature, for all her beauty, rarely leaves behind doorways that look as if they are waiting to be opened. There are rumors among old expeditions, quiet, unspoken accounts from those who have seen these stairways in person. They describe a strange stillness in the air, the kind that feels alive. The temperature drops unnaturally as you approach, and the sound of the wind seems to fade. Some claim their compasses stop working entirely, spinning slowly before freezing in place. And then there is the feeling that somewhere beyond those snow-sealed entrances, something watches back. The steps themselves are immense, carved for beings far taller than us, or perhaps meant to be seen from above, as if to signal something that flies. Their surfaces are smooth, polished by neither ice nor time, as though they've resisted erosion for reasons beyond understanding. Beneath layers of frost, the stone bears faint markings, parallel grooves, too precise to be accidental. Some scientists argue these formations belong to an ancient world, back when Antarctica was free of ice, when rivers carved valleys and civilizations might have thrived in its temperate air. If that is true, then these stairways could be the last fragments of a forgotten age, preserved in the cold because the earth itself refused to let them die. But others believe differently. They say these are not relics of a lost people, but the memory of the planet, that the ice itself remembers the hands that once shaped it and recreates their work through pressure and time, that every ridge, every curve, every stair is the echo of something the earth once saw and never truly forgot. Perhaps that is what we are seeing now. Not architecture, but remembrance. The planet's attempt to rebuild the past it buried too soon. As the ice melts and shadows deepen, the stairways seem to emerge more each year, like a story retelling itself through thawing pages. The entrances grow darker, their edges clearer. It feels as though the land is preparing to reveal something it has kept hidden for far too long. Maybe they lead to nothing. Or maybe they lead to what came before us, to the moment when humanity's first blueprint was written in stone and forgotten beneath the snow. The steps rise, patient and silent, leading nowhere we can yet follow. But every year the ice softens, and the doorways wait a little less. Long before satellites drew the edges of our world, maps were acts of faith. Ink bled into parchment not from certainty, but from belief, the belief that the world could be known, that its secrets could be traced by steady hands and open seas. Yet among the scrolls of the past lies one that refuses to obey history. The year was 1513. A man named Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer, drew a map using fragments of older charts, maps said to come from sailors long gone, from lands that shouldn't have existed. What he created was a masterpiece of impossible accuracy, a depiction of the world centuries ahead of its time. And at the bottom of that map, where blank parchment should have been, was something extraordinary, a coastline unmistakably resembling Antarctica. But this was more than geography. The coastline he drew was not covered in ice. Centuries before explorers would even sight the continent's frozen cliffs, Piri Reis had drawn a warm green land, its contours matching modern sonar maps of Antarctica's subglacial terrain. How could he have known what lay beneath 2 miles of solid ice? Ice that has been there for tens of thousands of years. Historians tried to explain it away. Some said it was South America, stretched by the errors of primitive tools. Others claimed it was coincidence, a misinterpretation of an old sailor's tale. But the precision was too perfect. The proportions too deliberate. Whoever had drawn those original lines saw a world that no longer existed, a world before the freeze. The question is not how Piri Reis drew it, but whose memory he borrowed to do it. Somewhere, in the deep archives of human time, knowledge has been lost and rediscovered, like a tide that rises, forgets, and returns. Ancient civilizations once mapped stars with accuracy that rivals our telescopes. They measured Earth's circumference before compasses existed. Is it so hard to believe that one of them, long before our recorded dawn, sailed far enough to see Antarctica alive? Imagine it. Vast rivers carving through green valleys, mountains crowned not with snow, but with rain. Perhaps ships once crossed those waters, guided by a sun that never set. Perhaps they charted it not as a place of exile, but of wonder. And when the ice came, their maps became memories, passed from one age to another until the meaning faded, and the world forgot what it once knew. The Piri race map is not alone. Other ancient charts, the Oronteus Phineus, the Boache, the Haji Ahmed, all sketch the same forbidden outline. Together, they whisper the same question through time. Who was here before us? When scientists overlaid those ancient coastlines with modern radar scans, the match was undeniable. Beneath Antarctica's ice, the old maps fit perfectly, like a key sliding into the lock of a forgotten vault. It was as if the Earth itself had been copied long before the human race began to write its own history. Some dismiss it as luck, as artistry, as the imagination of sailors who dreamed too far. But imagination cannot know the unseen. It cannot draw the buried. Perhaps these maps are echoes, fragments of a knowledge we once had, buried under the same ice that hides its proof. Or perhaps the Earth, through those who listened, was trying to remember itself. For every coastline that fades into white, another line waits beneath, a map, not of geography, but of memory. And every time we redraw the world, we move a little closer to what it once was. Centuries before discovery, someone remembered Antarctica alive. And maybe, just maybe, they wanted us to remember it too. Before the white, there was green. Before the silence, there was song. The low hum of rivers, the whisper of leaves, the sound of rain falling softly over endless valleys. Antarctica, now the coldest place on Earth, was once alive, and the proof lies frozen in its bones. In 1912, explorers cutting through the trans-Antarctic mountains found something impossible: the remains of trees, not driftwood or fragments, but trunks still rooted in the ground, their rings preserved like the pages of a long-lost book. Beneath layers of ancient frost, the Earth had hidden a memory of warmth. Those trees had once reached toward a sun that never truly set, bathed in light that circled the horizon instead of falling. Around them, rivers flowed through plains of green. Ferns grew shoulder-high, insects hummed through humid air, and life moved freely across a land that has since forgotten the meaning of life. Scientists now know that 50 million years ago, Antarctica was a paradise. Its climate was mild, its coasts rich with forests of beech and ginkgo. Dinosaurs may have walked its shores. Mammals nested where glaciers now rule. There were no walls of ice, no storms that screamed across endless plains, only water, warmth, and time. But paradise never lasts. The Earth began to shift. Continents drifted like sleeping giants, and the world's great balance tilted. Oceans cooled, winds changed, and Antarctica was left behind, isolated, surrounded by the new cold of the Southern Ocean. Slowly, its skies dimmed, its rivers froze, and its forests turned to stone. Even now the remains of that world wait in the ice. Fossilized leaves still hold their shape, imprinted with the delicate veins of long-extinct trees. Beneath the glaciers, entire trunks lie buried upright, their roots still gripping ancient soil. They are the ghosts of a living Earth, forests that never fell, only froze. Tugeuda. Bulk among them, even in fragments, is to feel time collapse. You can almost hear it, the rustle of leaves that no longer exist, the distant roll of thunder in a sky that no longer breathes. The fossils are not silent. They are the echoes of a song the planet once sang to itself. Perhaps that is what the ice is trying to protect. Not just history, but memory. A living record of what warmth felt like, preserved in stone because forgetting would have been too cruel. The earth, like any being, keeps its most painful memories buried deep. And in Antarctica, those memories have weight. Tons of it. Each layer of ice presses down on an older dream. Each year buries the color green a little deeper. Yet even in this endless white, the past refuses to die completely. Tiny spores, trapped in the frozen soil, still awaken when thawed. Microscopic life sleeps in darkness, waiting for a warmth it once knew. If you could listen beneath the glaciers, you might hear it, the slow heartbeat of a world that remembers itself, the sound of roots dreaming in the dark. Antarctica was never meant to be barren. It chose silence only because it had once known too much sound. And perhaps that is the sorrow that lingers in its winds, not emptiness, but memory. The grief of a continent that remembers what it once was. Beneath the glaciers, forests still stand, their roots locked in frozen time. They are monuments, not of death, but of endurance. Proof that even in the deepest cold, the earth never truly forgets the warmth it lost. There was a time when Antarctica was not white. When its horizons glowed gold at sunrise, and rivers wandered lazily through forests so vast they reached the edge of the sea. The air was thick with mist and warmth, the kind that carried the scent of soil and life. It is difficult to imagine now. This kingdom of frost, once breathing green, alive beneath the same sun that now only glances across its ice. Geologists call it the Eocene, a warm period that began some 50 million years ago. But it feels older than that, like a dream the planet once had and never truly woke from. Fossilized leaves found deep in the permafrost still hold the shape of that dream. Delicate veins etched in stone, imprints of a world that knew no winter. Back then, Antarctica sat farther north, closer to the warmth of the equator. It was not the isolated land we know, but part of a thriving ecosystem that stretched across the ancient supercontinent. There were no poles of death, no deserts of ice, only rivers, deltas, and living things. Forests of ferns and ginkgo swayed under endless daylight. Giant birds roamed the skies. The world was balanced, or so it seemed. But balance, even in paradise, is fragile. The earth shifted, slowly, invisibly. Continents drifted apart, and the seas began to circle Antarctica like a noose. The Antarctic circumpolar current was born, a cold ribbon of water that cut the continent off from warmth. The skies darkened. The forests began to fall silent. And then came the snow. At first it was gentle, fleeting, the way seasons come and go. But the cold deepened with each age. Rivers hardened. Valleys turned to ice. The land that had once held life like a cradle began to freeze from the inside out. And as the warmth fled, so did the memory of it. What caused the final collapse, no one truly knows. Some scientists say it was carbon, the slow exhalation of a plane, cooling its fever. Others believe something far more sudden happened. A catastrophe, a shift so violent that the skies themselves dimmed. Perhaps an impact, perhaps a tilt. Or perhaps something the earth chose to bury. If there was ever civilization here, if thinking beings once walked this green world, their traces are now sealed beneath miles of ice. And maybe that's why the continent feels haunted. Not by death, but by survival. A paradise punished for remembering. Today, we stand above its frozen skin and call it a wasteland. But beneath, warmth still lingers. Volcanic heat flickers under the ice like a pulse refusing to stop. Subglacial lakes remain liquid, untouched by time. Even now, Life persists in the dark. Microbial, patient, waiting for the next era of thaw. Perhaps the Earth doesn't forget paradise. It only hides it until it's ready to begin again. When geologists whisper of the warm period, their words carry awe and sorrow in equal measure. They speak of a time when the planet's heart beat slower, steadier, when no species ruled, and every creature knew its place in the rhythm of life. And maybe that rhythm still echoes beneath us, faint, muffled, but alive. A heartbeat, trapped in ice, waiting to be heard again. Antarctica was once the gentlest place on Earth, a sanctuary of rivers and light. But paradise has a habit of disappearing, and sometimes it hides itself in cold so deep, even time forgets where it went. Now the ice remembers what the world does not, that warmth is never lost. It is only waiting for return. Deep beneath the oldest ice, where no light has touched for millions of years, something sleeps. It is not a mountain, nor a natural fault, nor the random shape of geology at work. It is order, vast, deliberate, and unnervingly precise. When the first radar scans pierced the thick white crust of Antarctica, they were meant to measure layers of ice and stone. But what they found was geometry. Right angles, repeating corridors, patterns that stretched for miles beneath the frozen ground. Structures, not the chaos of nature, but the symmetry of creation. Scientists dismissed them at first, data errors, sensor ghosts, digital illusions caused by the ice itself. But the anomalies persisted, showing up again and again, in the same places, with the same dimensions. Vast rectangular shapes buried under miles of frozen time. Perfect alignment, as though designed with purpose. The question rose quietly, like a chill under the skin. Could these be ruins? If so, they are older than anything we know. Older than the ice that hides them, older than recorded civilization itself. Some estimate their outlines stretch for tens of kilometers, forming patterns too regular to be accidents. Others whisper of metallic signatures, faint but consistent, echoes of something built, not born. To think of builders in this place is to imagine a history far deeper than ours, a people who stood where we now see only cold, who shaped the world before it turned against them, who watched the sky darken and the warmth fade, and knew what was coming. Perhaps they did not vanish. Perhaps they were buried. There are fragments, accounts from early expeditions that mention strange formations glimpsed through fissures in the ice, walls that reflected light too evenly, corners that met with mathematical precision, and then silence. Reports sealed, missions cancelled, photographs lost. It is as if every time someone gets too close, the story folds itself back into secrecy. If these structures are real, they would rewrite everything, because they would prove that civilization did not begin in the warmth of the Fertile Crescent, but in the cold silence of the South. That knowledge is not born from comfort, but from survival, and that perhaps, before our history began, there was another. Sometimes I wonder if the ice itself is the architect. If it remembers what it once covered and tries in its own way to keep it safe. The Earth may not have destroyed this civilization. It may have preserved it, sealing their work beneath 1 billion tons of frozen air, keeping their story hidden until we were ready or desperate enough to find it. When the radars sweep the same coordinates again, the images seem to shift slightly, as though whatever lies below is not entirely still. Shapes realign, echoes deepen. It's as if the continent itself breathes beneath its own weight. Could something so ancient still move? Still remember? Maybe the builders are not lost, only waiting. Waiting for the warmth to return, for the ice to break open the vault they built for themselves. Or maybe we are the ones meant to remember, to rediscover what the planet has hidden for so long. Whatever sleeps there beneath the ice, it is not dead. It is memory given form. The echo of design, precise, patient, and eternal. And if the day comes when the ice finally melts and those lost structures rise into the light, the question will no longer be who built them. It will be whether they ever truly left. In a century defined by division, there was one moment when the world suddenly agreed. It was 1959, the height of the Cold War. Nations were arming for the unthinkable, skies split by the threat of fire and fear. Yet, at the bottom of the world, a silence deeper than any ocean drew them all together. 12 nations, the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, France, Japan and others, gathered to sign a treaty unlike any before it. A pact not of conquest, but of restraint. They called it the Antarctic Treaty. Its words were simple, almost poetic in their irony. No war, no weapons, no ownership, no interference. A continent shared by all, and truly known by none. On paper, it was a victory for peace, an agreement to preserve the last untouched land on Earth. But beneath its calm language, something didn't fit. This was 1959. Nations were dividing the world into spheres of influence, spying, testing, claiming every inch of sky and sea. Why then did the same powers suddenly choose to stop at the edge of Antarctica? The answer perhaps lies not in politics, but in fear. In the years before the treaty, Antarctica had become a place of obsession. Expeditions from both sides of the Iron Curtain had ventured south, some for science, some for reasons less clear. Admiral Byrd's Operation High Jump, the largest polar mission ever launched, ended abruptly and without explanation. Soviet researchers reported radio anomalies, strange magnetic readings, and zones their instruments could not penetrate. Then, almost overnight, exploration slowed. Bases were abandoned, routes were restricted, access became permission only. The official reason was environmental protection. The unofficial truth was never written down. Even today, under the treaty, no one truly owns Antarctica. No one may mine it, weaponize it, or claim its resources. The continent belongs to peace and science, yet all scientific missions must be registered, monitored, and approved. Flights that stray beyond marked sectors are turned away. Satellite images are blurred or classified, a land of ice ruled by silence. Perhaps it was an act of conscience, humanity's attempt to leave at least one place untouched. Or perhaps, beneath the words of peace, the nations agreed on something else entirely, that some truths are too dangerous to divide. What if, hidden beneath the frozen crust, they had found something that made competition meaningless, something older than war, older than us? It would explain the sudden unity, the quiet urgency to keep the continent sealed under a single watch. Because secrets this large do not belong to countries. They belong to history itself. Every year, new nations join the treaty, pledging the same silence. The number grows, but the secrecy remains. Even in the age of global transparency, Antarctica stays invisible, a blank white patch where truth vanishes into protocol. The world watches from afar, convinced that the ice is just ice. But perhaps the treaty was never about preserving the land. Perhaps it was about preserving what lies beneath it. A vault cannot stay closed forever. The signatures on that agreement may fade, but the ice does not care for treaties. It listens, it remembers. And one day, when the frost finally breaks and the old structures rise again into the light, the world will remember the moment it tried to bury its own curiosity in a continent sworn to silence. In 1947, The world had just emerged from the fire of war. The sky was still haunted by the smoke of cities, and humanity for the first time had seen what it was capable of destroying. Yet even in the ruins of victory, the eyes of the powerful turned south, toward a place untouched by the bombs and boundaries that now scarred the planet. That place was Antarctica. The mission was called Operation High Jump. On paper, it was a scientific expedition, a logistical test in extreme conditions, but in reality, it was something far larger, the most ambitious Antarctic operation in history. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a seasoned explorer and war hero, led an armada of ships, aircraft, and over 4,000 men toward the bottom of the world. It was a military fleet, not a research team. And their orders were curious: to establish a defensive presence and conduct aerial reconnaissance over the uncharted interior. What were they expecting to defend against in a land of ice? The mission began in silence and ended in mystery. For months, the ships disappeared into the mist, moving between icebergs like shadows of a forgotten war. Communication flickered, reports came sporadically, and then nothing. The operation was meant to last 6 months. It ended in 8 weeks. When Admiral Byrd returned to the United States, he was not the same man. In the few interviews he gave before his words were censored or lost, he spoke cautiously, as if trying to tell the truth without saying it aloud. He mentioned objects that moved faster than any aircraft known to man. He described a new enemy, capable of crossing from pole to pole in moments. And then suddenly, he stopped speaking altogether. The official report was buried under military secrecy. Some of the ships returned damaged. A few aircraft were lost. No explanation was ever released. The story faded into rumors, whispers of encounters, with something not human, or perhaps more ancient than human. Many dismissed Byrd's words as exhaustion, the stress of cold and command. But those who studied the timeline noticed something strange. Shortly after his return, the United States and the Soviet Union, enemies in every sense, both increased their interest in Antarctica. Secret flights, remote research, silent urgency. It was as if they knew something the world did not. Perhaps Operation High Jump found what the old maps had already warned us about: an opening, a passage, a forgotten vault beneath the white. Some say Byrd's planes flew over mountains shaped too perfectly to be natural, and valleys that seemed carved rather than formed. Others claim the fleet encountered lights that moved beneath the ice, following them like shadows that glowed. The truth remains buried, under classification, under decades of silence, under the ice itself. But one detail lingers. Before his words were taken from record, Admiral Byrd wrote in his journal that he had seen a land beyond the poles, a place of mystery, enclosed in eternal light. Was it metaphor, madness, or memory? We may never know what Byrd and his men witnessed, but whatever it was, it changed him. And perhaps it changed history. Because soon after, in 1959, came the Antarctic Treaty, and the continent was sealed to the world. Operation High Jump began as exploration. It ended as silence. And maybe that's all Antarctica ever wanted, to remind us that not every discovery is meant to be understood. Some are meant to be remembered in quiet. The story of Antarctica is not just written in ice, it is written in erasure. Every decade the same pattern repeats: discovery, silence, disappearance. It began in the 1960s, when technology first gave us the power to see beneath the frozen crust. Radar and seismic instruments pierced miles of white, revealing what eyes never could. At first the results were thrilling. Clean readings of ice layers, clear maps of ancient bedrock. But soon, the data began to twist. There were shapes, vast geometric voids where solid ground should be, patterns repeating across regions too distant to connect, echoes of heat beneath what should be the coldest depths of Earth. Teams from the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom all reported the same anomalies, perfectly circular hollows, hundreds of meters wide. Long corridors beneath glaciers arranged with eerie precision, places where instruments short-circuited, where signals returned not as data but as static, dense, pulsing static, as though something below was trying to speak in frequencies we could not understand. And then, one by one, the projects ended. Funding withdrawn, records sealed, names erased. Scientists who once published proudly in journals found their work classified, their careers redirected. Some disappeared into government contracts. Others simply stopped speaking. And the reports, those fragments of discovery, were locked away under words like national security and sensitive material. Officially, the reason was simple: equipment failure, misinterpretation, the need for further verification. But unofficially, even those who had been there whispered a different truth: that something had been found beneath the ice, something so unlike anything else on Earth that it could not be explained without rewriting what it meant to be human. In 1973, a British research flight recorded a magnetic insurge, only the size of a city under the Wilkes Land region, a perfect circle of density, too symmetrical for nature, too deep for machinery. The pilots were told never to repeat the route. The report was sealed. The name of the project was quietly removed from archives. A few years later, Soviet geologists encountered similar readings, radar distortions and sudden bursts of static that made their instruments go blind. They described it as standing above a heartbeat, a pulse buried beneath miles of silence. When they returned, their data was confiscated. The team disbanded. One of them later wrote that Antarctica remembers those who listen too closely. The vanishing reports continued into the 1990s, and even now, in the age of digital transparency, the pattern remains. Files disappear, coordinates are blurred, and every few years a research team comes home early, always citing weather, always leaving something unsaid. What is it about this continent that turns knowledge into secrecy? Maybe it's not what they found, but where they found it. Maybe those hollows and heat signatures are not geological at all, but architectural. The remains of something the Earth itself decided to keep hidden. Or maybe, as some scientists have quietly suggested, the ice is not just concealing the past, but protecting us from it. Antarctica does not give answers. It gives fragments, enough to ignite curiosity, never enough to satisfy it. And every time we get too close, something intervenes, as if the continent itself decides when we are allowed to know. Perhaps the silence of Antarctica is not emptiness. Perhaps it is defense. And maybe the real question was never what they discovered under the ice, but why, after all these years, the truth still cannot survive the cold. Beneath 4 kilometers of solid ice, where no sunlight has ever fallen, the world is still awake. It breathes slowly, in liquid rhythms, in quiet pulses that move unseen beneath the frozen skin of Antarctica. There, sealed away for millions of years, lie the subglacial lakes, vast reservoirs of water untouched since long before humans learned to speak. They were first discovered not by sight, but by sound, radar echoes that returned softer than expected, hinting at something moving beneath the solid crust. What the instruments revealed seemed impossible. Bodies of water the size of cities, flowing freely in the heart of a continent that should be lifeless. One lake in particular drew the world's attention, Lake Vostok, hidden beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice. For half a century, scientists dreamed of reaching it, calling it a portal to Earth's most ancient past. Here, they said, was a place untouched by time, an environment locked away before the first mammal took breath, before humanity itself was imagined. When the drilling began, it was done with reverence. Every meter down was a step into another age. The deeper they went, the older the world became. Each layer of ice was a chapter, one of storms, one of warmth, one of silence. Until finally, after decades of patience, they reached the surface of the hidden lake. They expected stillness. What they found instead was movement. Sensors recorded pressure shifts, faint waves rippling through the darkness below. Instruments trembled as if something vast and unseen brushed against them. The lake, sealed off from the world for 20 million years, was not sleeping. It was alive. Microbes were discovered, ancient forms of life that defied understanding. Some bore no relation to anything known on the surface, their DNA so alien that scientists could only guess their lineage. Others thrived on minerals instead, but of sunlight, feeding on chemical traces from the rock below. Life, it seemed, had adapted to an eternity without the sun. But there were other signs too. Currents, where no currents should exist. Heat anomalies that could not be explained by geology alone. Some researchers described it as if the water was breathing, rising and falling in intervals too regular for chance. When the samples were taken to the surface, the data changed hands quickly, analyzed, debated, then quietly classified. Access was restricted. The public learned only fragments, that life had been found, that it was unlike anything else on Earth, and that the rest of the findings were under review. What else lay within that liquid tomb remains a mystery. Was it merely microbial life, or something older, larger, more complex? Other subglacial lakes have since been found, hundreds of them, connected through channels like veins under ice. They form a hidden network, circulating quietly beneath the continent. To think that beneath all this frozen silence lies an ocean of motion, a living system, ancient and aware of itself, changes the way we see this land entirely. Perhaps these lakes are not just relics of Earth's past, but living archives, the planet's own memory, kept alive under pressure and darkness. The last survivors of a forgotten age. And maybe that's what the Earth has been protecting all along. Not ruins, but life. Not death, but endurance. For millions of years, the ice above Lake Vostok has held its breath, guarding a secret too precious to expose. And now that we've broken through, one can't help but wonder, did we uncover the past, or did we disturb it? Because sometimes, what we call discovery is only the moment we realize that something ancient has already been watching us from below. In the depths where sunlight has never reached, there is motion. Not the motion of wind or current, but of something alive, something small, patient, and ancient beyond imagination. Beneath Antarctica's crushing layers of ice, where temperature and pressure should forbid existence, life still moves. It hums quietly, as though the Earth itself refuses to let go of its last breath. When the first samples were drawn from Lake Vostok and the buried lakes beneath the continent, the world expected sterility. It was logical. No sun, no warmth, no oxygen. Nothing should have survived there for even a moment, let alone for millions of years. Yet under the microscope, the impossible revealed itself. Movement. Tiny organisms drifting through the water, blinking softly in a universe of darkness. These were not invaders from the surface. They were residents. Their DNA was unlike anything known, not related to modern microbes, not descended from surface life. They belonged to something older, something that had endured through extinction after extinction, thriving in the kind of silence the rest of life could not bear. Some scientists call them extremophiles, survivors of extremes. But perhaps they are not survivors at all. Perhaps they are simply the ones who never left. In the dark, they have learned to feed on stone and metal, to live off the faint chemical whispers of the Earth itself. They do not need light. They do not even need air. They exist in a rhythm closer to geology than biology, slow, endless, patient. Their world is made not of years, but of ages. It is strange to think that beneath all the ice and emptiness, there may be ecosystems, entire webs of life, moving unseen beneath our feet. Each lake a closed universe, each organism a story from a time before us. And if they could speak, what would they tell? That life does not begin in warmth, but in will. That existence is not measured by light, but by endurance. In those frozen chambers, scientists have found bacteria that breathe iron instead of oxygen. Others feed on hydrogen or sulfur. They glow faintly under the microscope, as if carrying a light of their own, a quiet defiance against extinction. What if extinction is not an end at all, but a pause, a form of sleep the planet takes when it needs to forget? And what if these small, stubborn creatures are the keepers of memory, fragments of worlds that the Earth once was, kept alive in the deepest cold, so that nothing is ever truly lost? Some researchers have wondered if the life below the ice is not entirely natural, if it evolved separately, or if it was preserved deliberately. The patterns of survival are too perfect, too stable, as though something beyond evolution designed them to endure forever. When the drills first reached those hidden waters, the scientists expected silence. What they found was a heartbeat, the sound of motion in a place thought dead. And when they pulled the samples up, some of the organisms died instantly in the open air, unable to exist in the light. Others adapted. They changed, slowly, as if remembering. Perhaps they were not seeing us for the first time, but recognizing us. Life in the dark does not ask to be understood. It only asks to continue. And it does. Beneath 4 kilometers of frozen time, untouched, unbroken, and eternal. Down there, the planet remembers what it once knew. That life does not belong to light, or even to time. It belongs to the silence that outlives both. Perhaps that is why the ice feels alive, because beneath it, the Earth still dreams of everything it used to be. In the coldest, driest valley on Earth, where no rain has fallen for millions of years, the ice bleeds. From the heart of the Taylor Glacier, a crimson river spills slowly into the white, staining the snow with the color of rust, of memory, of blood. Scientists call it Blood Falls, but even that name feels too human for what it truly is. The first explorers to see it thought it was a wound, the glacier itself torn open, leaking from within. The red water shimmered in the pale light like something alive, a silent outcry from a land that should know only silence. Yet this was no illusion. Beneath that flowing scar lies an ancient pocket of water, sealed off for over 1 million years, a world preserved in isolation, and one that had not forgotten how to move. When researchers traced the flow back to its source, they found a hidden lake buried beneath the ice, a prison of darkness and pressure. Inside it, the water was thick with iron and salt, oxygenless, toxic. Yet when they peered closer, they saw motion. Life. Microbes swam through the red, thriving in what should have been death, feeding not on sunlight or air, but on the chemistry of decay, the slow rusting of the planet itself. They were not new, they were ancient, a lineage unbroken since a time when Antarctica was warm, when the continent still remembered the color green. Every drop that spills from the glacier is a message, a slow leak from the Earth's oldest memory. The iron in the water oxidizes as it touches air, turning it red. But beneath that surface color is something deeper, something alive and restless, something that has been waiting in darkness for far too long. It is as though the Earth itself has opened a vein to remind us what runs beneath the white. Blood Falls is not violent. Its movement is slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. It does not flood. It seeps. It whispers its existence drop, as if reluctant to let go of what it has kept hidden for eons. The flow never stops. Even in temperatures that would freeze steel, it continues, like the steady heartbeat of a world that refuses to die. Scientists see chemistry, others see symbolism, but perhaps both are true. Perhaps this is how the planet remembers, through motion, through persistence, through the color of what once lived. Standing before it, the ice feels alive. The air hums faintly with a metallic taste, and the crimson streak glows dimly in the light, as though the glacier bleeds not from pain, but from memory. Some call it a warning, the Earth's reminder that nothing buried stays forgotten forever. That what we hide, it eventually reveals, in its own time, in its own language. The microbes within the falls have adapted to isolation, to darkness, to poison, a mirror of the resilience we see across all of life. They are proof that existence does not need light to endure, that survival is not about thriving, but remembering how to keep breathing in silence. Every droplet that touches the snow carries with it the memory of warmth, a whisper from the age when the ice was still river and the valleys still green. Perhaps the planet, through this slow bleeding, is showing us its grief, not anger, not vengeance, but sorrow. Because even the earth mourns what it has lost. In this valley of eternal ice, beneath the coldest sky, the planet bleeds history one drop at a time, red against white, past against present, life against silence. And as it does, the world is reminded that the ice may be frozen, but it is far from dead. At the bottom of the world, where wind screams like memory and compasses lose their purpose, something pulses beneath the ice. It is faint, almost lost in the static, but it is there. A rhythm too precise for chance, a signal that should not exist. For decades, explorers and scientists have caught fragments of it, an electromagnetic heartbeat echoing through the frozen crust of Antarctica. It comes without pattern, without warning, and yet when it appears, it always sounds the same, regular, measured, mechanical, almost deliberate. The earliest recordings date back to the 1960s, when a small team of geophysicists monitoring seismic activity picked up a strange interference. It was not geological. It did not match the Earth's natural hum or the shifting of ice. It was something else, a repeating pulse every 6 seconds, unwavering, and coming from far beneath the continent's heart. At first, they blamed the equipment. Then, radio reflection. Then, nothing at all. The report was filed, ignored, and quietly sealed. But the pulse never stopped. Years later, new instruments found it again. Stronger this time, deeper. It seemed to move, as if whatever was producing it was not fixed, but traveling slowly under the ice. Some called it an anomaly of magnetism. Others, a resonance caused by buried minerals. But those who listened closely said it sounded alive. When the signal is played through speakers, it has a strange effect, an uneasy harmony that feels almost intentional. Too steady to be noise, too imperfect to be a machine. It falls somewhere in between, like the sound of something remembering how to speak. There are stories, whispered among researchers who worked in the southern bases, of nights when the signal would rise suddenly, audible even through the static of the wind. Instruments would flicker, lights would dim, and for a few moments the air itself would seem to hum. Those who heard it described the same sensation, a feeling of being watched, not by something hostile, but by something vast, ancient, and aware. The source has never been found. Every attempt to trace it leads only deeper, to regions unreachable by drill or radar. The continent guards its secret well. Some believe it originates from beneath the Gamburtsev Mountains, a range buried under miles of ice as old as the continent itself. Others think it comes from one of the subglacial lakes, perhaps even Vostok, where ancient life still stirs in darkness. But there are those who whisper a different theory entirely, that the pulse is not natural at all, that it is a beacon, The echo of something left behind, something that once called out and still does, even if there's no one left to answer. Could it be the remnants of a civilization erased by the ice? A message sent to no one but the planet itself? Or could it be the Earth's own voice? The electromagnetic memory of its heartbeat, buried and replaying through time. In every recording, the signal carries the same cold precision. It is not random. It never drifts. It endures, as though it were waiting. Maybe it is not trying to be heard by us. Maybe it was never meant to. Maybe we are only now crossing the edge of a frequency older than humanity, a rhythm that belongs to the planet's forgotten past. The ice does not speak in words. It speaks in pulses, in repetition, in silence that knows itself. And beneath Antarctica's endless white, the Earth keeps sending its signal, steady, mechanical, eternal, not asking to be understood, only to be remembered. Beneath the frozen skin of Antarctica, the ground hums with patterns. Radar waves pass through the ice and return not with chaos but with structure. Corridors and chambers, lines and voids that seem to interconnect like veins beneath a body long asleep. Scientists expected cracks, caverns and pressure gaps. What they found instead looked like design. It began with a survey, a routine radar sweep meant to map the thickness of the ice sheet. The first images came back ordinary, but deeper scans revealed something else. Long, narrow tunnels stretching for miles, bending with geometric precision. Some led to vast hollow spaces, others intersected at perfect right angles. It was as if the ice concealed a blueprint, not of geology, but of architecture. At first the data was dismissed as artifact, errors caused by signal distortion. Yet when multiple expeditions repeated the scans, the same shapes appeared again and again, too consistent to be coincidence. The corridors formed grids, spiraling networks buried miles below, following no known fault lines or patterns of erosion. Then came the thermal readings. In certain sectors, the instruments registered heat, faint but persistent, radiating from deep within the network. Too warm for natural ice, too cold for magma. The heat pulsed in intervals, rhythmic, deliberate, almost as though something beneath was cycling through stages of rest and motion. To the researchers, it made no sense. There were no tectonic activities in those regions, no geothermal vents. Yet the heat signatures repeated every few days, as if in response to something, an internal heartbeat buried under miles of frozen time. What could produce warmth in the coldest place on Earth? Some suggested the explanation lay in physics, perhaps trapped energy, slowly released through mineral interaction. Others whispered a darker possibility, that these struck. Turas were remnants of something built, and that part of it still functioned. The corridors, when mapped in full, formed patterns eerily similar to electrical circuits, lines of flow, intersections, nodes. To the human eye, they resembled an immense design, not random, but purposeful, as though the continent itself had once been alive with movement, and these tunnels were its arteries. And in a way, perhaps it was alive. The Earth has a memory written not in words, but in temperature, in magnetism, in the quiet rhythm of energy that never dies. Maybe what these scientists were detecting wasn't machinery or life, but the residual pulse of a world remembering itself, an echo of motion that refuses to fade. In the heart of this network, deep under the eastern ice shelf, lies a void so vast it defies explanation. A space large enough to hold a mountain range, yet filled with air warmer than the frozen world above. Some call it a geological fluke. Others, a chamber. Whatever it is, it exists in silence, unseen, unreachable, waiting. When the radar teams presented their findings, most of the data was quickly classified. Public reports were trimmed to phrases like anomalous voids and subglacial formations. The word network never appeared again. But those who have seen the full scans say the truth is unmistakable. Beneath the continent's crust, the ice is not resting. It is organized, structured, a web of space and motion as deliberate as any city, only older. Maybe the grid is the remnant of a civilization erased by the cold. Or maybe it's something deeper, the Earth's own circuitry, still humming beneath the weight of time, keeping a memory alive. The continent is not sleeping. It is waiting. And the longer we listen, the more it begins to sound less like an echo of the past, and more like the faint hum of something still awake beneath the ice. In the deepest places beneath the Antarctic ice, where light has never lived and sound moves like memory, the machines still hum. At least, that's what the data suggests. And the people who have gone there, those few who were allowed to listen, say they felt it, not heard but felt. A low vibration rising through the frozen stone, steady and alive. It began with the strange metals. Samples pulled from boreholes deeper than any before, materials that shouldn't exist. Metals that bent without breaking, that resisted heat, that healed from the marks of a drill as if remembering their original form. When examined under the microscope, their structure was crystalline, yet perfectly ordered, more advanced than anything known in metallurgy. The readings confused even the machines meant to analyze them. Then came the walls. Teams drilling near the buried voids of the under-ice network reported striking something solid. Not rock, not ice. Smooth, seamless. When the drill stopped, it wasn't because it broke. It was because it reverberated. The sound that came through was hollow, harmonic, as though the ice had struck a chord and the earth had answered. At first, the researchers assumed it was an anomaly, but as they listened closer, they realized the vibration wasn't fading, it was responding. The frequency shifted when equipment moved near it. The ice itself seemed to react, as though it could feel the intrusion. For years, these findings were buried in scientific obscurity, dismissed as malfunction, optical illusion, or noise interference. But quietly, more teams began reporting the same thing. Metals that weren't metals, walls that hummed, and ice that closed its wounds. Holes drilled one day were found sealed the next, smooth, untouched, as if the continent was healing itself. It was then that some began to whisper the unthinkable, that the continent wasn't dead. Therms. At beneath the frozen crust, something was still functioning, not human, not mechanical in our sense of the word, but living all the same. The radar patterns, the grid beneath the ice, suddenly made new sense. Perhaps those corridors weren't ruins. Perhaps they were veins. Perhaps the humming walls were not structures, but organs. And the warmth detected by sensors wasn't geothermal. It was circulation. An ancient system still alive under the surface, older than civilization, maybe older than humanity itself. If so, then what kind of world existed before the ice came? And what kind of intelligence could build something that endures under frozen pressure for millions of years, still humming, still waiting, still aware? Some of the researchers described strange phenomena after working near those sites: disorientation, brief blackouts, dreams of movement beneath the ground. One scientist wrote in his private notes, "It's as if the ice is thinking, not in words, but in tones." Most of these reports never reached the public. Those who spoke too loudly were reassigned or silenced. The official narrative remained simple: natural anomalies, magnetic distortions, nothing more. But among those who have stood above that humming ice, few believe that. There's a kind of rhythm to the sound, not random, not mechanical, but alive, almost like breathing. It moves through the frozen corridors like a slow heartbeat, rising and falling in a pattern too ancient to decipher. Maybe Antarctica isn't just remembering what it once was. Maybe it's still being what it was. A machine so vast and old that the Earth itself has grown around it, protecting it under a tomb of ice. And if that's true, if what lies beneath the white still breathes, then perhaps the ice isn't hiding our past. Perhaps it's protecting its own future. The sea around Antarctica is not still. It breathes, slow, deep and restless, as though something vast moves beneath it, unseen beneath the mirrored ice. To the explorers who have sailed those waters, it feels alive in a way that no ocean should. The silence isn't empty. It's observant. Reports began quietly, whispered in ship logs and radio transmissions that never reached the press. Crews spoke of pale shapes gliding beneath the surface, forms too large for whales, too smooth for ice, too deliberate to be illusion. They moved with uncanny precision, parallel to the hulls of ships, matching speed and direction before vanishing into the deep. When Japan's whaling vessels ventured into Antarctic waters in the 1950s, sailors began telling stories. They called them ningen, the human ones. According to the few who claimed to see them, the creatures were enormous, pale, and eerily human-shaped, with limbs, a face, and movement that mimicked thought rather than instinct. Some said they stretched nearly 30 meters long, white against the black water like ghosts of another world. The official explanations were simple: shadows, icebergs, tricks of light, fatigue. But those who saw them swore they moved with intent. Sometimes they followed, sometimes they circled, sometimes they simply watched. One report described a ningen rising briefly from the sea beside a ship. Smooth skin glistening under the aurora, featureless except for faint impressions where eyes might be. The creature lingered for several seconds before slipping back under the waves without a sound. The ocean closed, as if nothing had been there at all. For years, these stories stayed confined to rumor. Yet, as technology improved, so did the evidence. Submersible drones began capturing strange anomalies, silhouettes too symmetrical for natural ice, moving through the sonar like giants of the deep. Their heat, signatures, faint but consistent, appeared near underwater openings and subglacial channels, the same areas where radar had detected the hidden network beneath the continent. Were these creatures guardians of that buried world, or its remnants? Some scientists believe the ningen are biological, evolved forms of life adapted to the extreme, capable of surviving in both sea and subglacial lakes. But others, quietly and off-record, suggest something more unsettling, that these beings are not creatures at all, but extensions of something deeper. After all, the reports of their appearance seem to coincide with readings of electromagnetic disturbance, the same rhythmic pulses recorded in previous chapters. Whenever the signal beneath the ice strengthens, the sightings increase. Coincidence, perhaps, or communication. Standing on the deck of a ship in the Antarctic night, surrounded by endless white and black, one feels small, not because the world is empty, but because it isn't. The sea beneath the ice is ancient, older than humanity, older even than memory. And maybe, in its depths, the planet has kept company. Beings who watch the rise of man not with fear or hostility, but with quiet curiosity. If that's true, then they are not invaders, nor are they lost. They are witnesses to everything that came and went above the ice, watching the surface world repeat its mistakes, waiting for the right silence to return. Perhaps that's why the waters near Antarctica always feel heavy with presence, because something is looking back. The Japanese sailors who named them believed they were not monsters, but mirrors, reflections of ourselves in another form, untouched by time. The ocean, after all, has always been a memory. And so the question remains, not what they are, but how long they've been waiting beneath us. Because sometimes, when the ice shifts and the sea hums, lo, you can almost feel it, the gaze of something that never left, For a land without people, Antarctica has always been strangely crowded, crowded not with cities or nations, but with silence. A silence carefully built, layer by layer, like the ice itself. Because beneath that endless white, there is more than cold. There is control. Since the middle of the 20th century, a quiet cooperation has bound the world's powers together, one of the few that never broke, even through wars and rivalries. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, was written to preserve peace. But what if peace was only the surface? What if the real purpose was to preserve something else? Not the land, but the secret beneath it. It began, as most cover-ups do, with science. Teams reported anomalies, heat where there should be none, metal in places untouched by men, signals too rhythmic to be natural. But every time discovery neared revelation, the same pattern followed. Projects ended, funding vanished, and the data was sealed away for environmental safety. Over time, the phrase became a shield. Environmental safety zone. It sounded noble, responsible, but for those who worked there it meant something different. Restricted access, silenced communication, controlled findings. Scientists arrived with questions and left with signed agreements. What they saw stayed buried, beneath confidentiality clauses, beneath ice, beneath fear. Satellite images of certain regions blur automatically. Coordinates once open to the public now redirect. Even private expeditions have been turned back, their permits revoked without explanation. Yet construction continues in secret. Under the pretext of research, tunnels are drilled, stations expanded, and vast underground complexes built. Officially, they're for climate study and ice core preservation. Unofficially, some of those tunnels lead to nowhere on record. Those who have been stationed near such sites speak of entire sectors walled off from civilian teams. They describe the same things in whispers: elevators descending below the ice shelf, hallways lined with metal that doesn't corrode, hums that come from no generator. These bases are said to operate independently, not under national flags, but under joint administration. Governments and corporations working together in silence. Even communications are filtered through private networks, encrypted, untraceable. The continent that was once declared free of ownership is now more tightly controlled than any border on Earth. And yet, the world above sees nothing but snow. Every image shared, every document released, every story told about Antarctica passes through 1,000 unseen gates before it reaches the public. The narrative is shaped not by discovery, but by permission. Step by step, the truth is frozen, piece by piece, until no one remembers what was ever beneath it. It is a civilization of silence, not of people, but of information, built not from stone or steel, but from omission. Those who once chased answers now chase funding. Those who once explored now comply. And the few who still speak, the retired, the forgotten, talk about a time when science used to reveal, not conceal. They remember how it felt to dig into the unknown without permission. They remember the first cracks in the ice before the quiet began. Perhaps this is the final secret Antarctica holds, not what it hides, but how easily we agreed to stop looking. Because maybe the greatest cover-up is not what's buried in the ice, but what's been buried in us. That ancient human instinct to seek, to question, to know. And as long as the snow remains untouched, the silence will hold. Not because the truth is lost, but because someone decided it should be. Beneath the white lies not just a continent, but a vault of knowledge so complete, so carefully erased, that even the idea of discovery has been frozen. And so the Earth keeps its secret, and we keep pretending we never asked. The world is warming, and the planet is waking up. For thousands of years, Antarctica has kept its secrets sealed beneath miles of ice, a silence so deep that even time forgot how to reach it. But now, the white veil begins to thin. Cracks stretch across the glaciers like veins of light, and the past stirs beneath our feet. What happens when the memory of a planet begins to thaw? Satellites capture the first glimpses, shapes emerging from the retreating ice, ridges too symmetrical, foundations too clean. What once was hidden beneath eternal winter now breathes again. The world calls it climate change. But to the Earth, it may be something else entirely. A release. As the ice melts, rivers return. Ancient lakes awaken, flooding corridors long sealed. Fossils rise from the permafrost, bones of creatures that should not exist, perfectly preserved, staring at a sun they have not seen in millions of years. And beneath them, metallic forms, walls, structures, angles that defy nature's randomness. At first, they are dismissed as optical illusions, as the brain's attempt to find patterns where none exist. But as more meltwater reveals more geometry, as shapes become clearer, denial becomes impossible. There is something down there, something built. The air above these newly uncovered sites carries a strange charge, a hum, faint but measurable, like the echo of machinery that never fully stopped running. Scientists argue about magnetic interference, about trapped gases, about the normal physics of a warming planet. But deep down, they know this is not normal. The ice isn't just melting, it's remembering. Every layer that falls away is a chapter lost to time. Each drip of water, a word spoken again after millennia of silence. And maybe this is how history corrects itself. Perhaps Antarctica was never meant to stay buried forever. Perhaps the ice was only a pause, a long, cold breath between civilizations. If so, what happens when the breath ends? When the glacier exhales and the planet begins to speak again? Beneath those collapsing cliffs of blue and white, things once frozen begin to move. Rivers flow where none have flowed in ages. Subglacial networks awaken, their warmth rising from below. Instruments register heat signatures where before there was only void. The same coordinates once marked as restricted, now revealed by accident, by nature itself. The governments that once controlled access can no longer contain the thaw. The truth is no longer in human hands. It is in the hands of the Earth. And perhaps that is what frightens us most, that the planet does not need us to reveal its secrets. It can do that on its own. Soon, when the last layer of ice falls away, humanity will look upon what lies beneath and be forced to confront the question it has long avoided. Was Antarctica ever empty, or was it simply waiting? Waiting for us to evolve enough to understand what it holds. Waiting for us to remember what we once knew. Because the ice is not dying, it is shedding. The silence is not breaking, it is speaking. And what rises from beneath will not be discovery, but remembrance. The continent at the end of the world was never the end at all. It was the beginning, paused, hidden, waiting for the warmth to return. Now, as the oceans rise and the world reshapes itself, the truth buried beneath the cold prepares to see daylight again. And when it does, humanity will finally have to face what it has always feared most, that the Earth has never been sleeping. It has only been waiting for us to wake up with it. The ice melts, and the silence begins to speak. What was buried for millennia now rises slowly into light, not to frighten us, but to remind us that the past was never gone, only waiting. Beneath every glacier, every drifting sheet of white, lies a memory of warmth, of motion, of worlds that lived before we learned to name them. The Earth is not revealing its secrets out of mercy. but out of need. It wants us to remember. And as the last frost fades, we are left with a question that feels older than time. Was Antarctica ever empty? Or were we simply not listening? If this journey stirred you, if you too feel that quiet pull toward the unknown, then don't let it end here. Because the more we look, the more the earth remembers. So stay curious, stay awake, and join us as we uncover the next great mystery of our world. Like the video, share it with those who still listen to the whispers beneath the ice, and subscribe to Mysteries of Earth, where the past is never lost. It's only waiting beneath the surface of our world.